Carmen thinks the worst thing that could happen is dropping that wine glass. She believes she's about to lose her job. Nothing more. But the man who just walked through those doors didn't come in to eat. He's been waiting 20 years for this exact moment. And here's the question that will haunt you. Did he arrive to save her, or to spring the trap she never knew she was part of? Carmen felt the weight of every gaze even before she realized she had spilled 3 drops of Chateau Margaux on the rim of the glass. It was nothing any customer could see, but Janet Morrison saw everything, turning any detail into a public spectacle. The dining room of Le Bernardin, always elegant, seemed to shrink when the supervisor's sharp voice cut through the silence like a cold blade. "Everyone can see those water spots from here." The phrase, launched with arrow-like precision, made the entire room tilt its head like predators sniffing weakness. 30 diners, maybe more, discreetly lifted their eyes from the expensive plates. Some pretended not to notice. Others didn't even try to hide it. Carmen kept her hand steady. Training balance with crystal glasses had been the first lesson she learned there. The second was far harder. Never react in front of Janet. Don't give ammunition. Don't let humiliation sink in. But this time, something inside her wavered. The Chateau Margaux, a wine costing nearly half the rent of the tiny apartment she shared with 2 roommates, trembled on the rim of the glass. The amber light from the French fixtures reflected on the liquid like sparks. Intense, dangerous. "I polished every glass in my section twice, Mrs. Morrison," she replied, keeping her tone polite, taking a deep breath to prevent her voice from betraying her dismay. A slight nod, full control, but the accent, that tiny trace that never fully disappeared, slipped back, scratching the syllables. The men in suits in the corner, discussing billion-dollar mergers, stopped mid-sentence. One even tilted his head, intrigued as if watching a rare auction. Human drama always mattered more than numbers, at least for a few seconds. Janet approached with perfectly measured steps. The sound of her heels echoed on the polished wood like hammer blows in a crusher. She had that rigid, almost military presence. Everything about her seemed designed to impose control. Hair pulled tight like a taut rope, flawless makeup, posture as straight as a vertical blade. "Don't make excuses." The words fell heavy, almost accusatory. "Our clientele expects perfection, not whatever standards you're used to." Some diners swallowed hard. The words were cruel enough to be undeniable, and polite enough to go unchallenged. Carmen felt her face heat up. The humiliation didn't come from the accusation itself. It came from Janet speaking loud enough to turn a non-existent mistake into a spectacle with an audience. The richest people in the city had just seen Carmen as something small, correctable, disposable. She forced herself to keep breathing. "I'll repolish them right away," she said firmly, even as her throat felt like it was closing. An answer that said, "I understand. I won't argue. I need this job." Janet tilted her head, as if savoring the submission. "Every glass in the restaurant, during your break." Unpaid. A silent murmur ran like a draft through the tables. Not outrage. Manhattan rarely got outraged at others' injustices. It was more of a light discomfort, like feeling a pebble in your shoe during a very expensive dinner. No one would do anything about it. Carmen placed the wine on the service station, every movement controlled with near-surgical precision. That was something Janet would never understand. Carmen could break inside but outwardly. She would never let anyone see. Her mother had taught her that dignity only disappeared when you surrendered. And Carmen had not surrendered. Her steps toward the kitchen had a steady rhythm. She didn't run, didn't hesitate, didn't look back, but her stomach ached. The weight of shame settled on her chest like a hot brick. The kitchen doorway offered brief shelter. The smell of hot butter, broth, freshly chopped garlic, pots clanging. The routine of a world where she wasn't seen as a target, just a worker. Maria, at the dish sink, caught Carmen's eye and gave a slight nod. Discreet, quick, but full of silent solidarity. Carmen picked up the microfiber cloths, the polisher, the cleaning solution. She took a deep breath before returning to the stage. When she pushed the door back into the dining room, everything had already returned to normal. People were eating, smiling, negotiating, living. Her humiliation had lasted exactly 40 seconds. and it was already just an annoying memory in the minds of those present. For Carmen, however, it was a fresh wound. Scene 2 now. She began polishing the glasses, shining brighter than stars. The repetition calmed her. Circular motions, steady rhythm, moderate pressure. Her reflection in the crystal seemed fragmented, but not broken. On the contrary, each fragment seemed to contain a new determination. She wouldn't stay here forever. She was studying, saving, preparing. Le Bernardin was just a step, a temporary internship. A gilded hell, yes, but temporary. Janet returned to the host station as if nothing had happened. Satisfied. In her mind, she had fulfilled her leadership role, a figure who maintained order through fear and shame. The surrounding tables resumed banal conversations about Aspen trips, annual bonuses, Montauk summer homes. The world kept spinning, indifferent to what had happened to Carmen. When she finished her section, Carmen picked up the Chateau Margaux again. The weight of the glass felt different now, as if it carried more than just expensive wine. 10 steps, that's all. 10 steps to the group of men's table. If she spilled a drop, if she slipped, if her hand trembled, Janet would have reason to crush her. Carmen took a deep breath. 1 step, 2, 3. And then the main door opened, not with the usual control of the staff, but with force. The cold October wind swept into the restaurant, disturbing the perfect stability of the room. The maître d' froze, or rather choked on his greeting. That was the first sign. The man who entered was not ordinary, not a regular customer, not someone who belonged to the polite noise of the elite. He entered like someone used to changing atmospheres simply by breathing. Tall, impeccable posture, silver hair, styled with surgical precision, a dark gray suit so perfectly cut it seemed to float, and those eyes, a pale blue, ancient, full of authority that needed no announcement. The entire restaurant lost his breath. Table conflicts hung suspended. Half-raised glasses froze midair. No one knew exactly who he was, but everyone knew he was someone. Every step he took seemed to measure the room, weigh the attendees, assess invisible sins. An old, experienced predator who didn't need to bare teeth to be feared. Carmen froze mid-step, glass in hand, as if the air had hardened around her. For the first time that night, her hand truly trembled. Janet at the host stand lifted her face. Recognition, then doubt, then a shadow, something very close to fear. But the defining moment came when the pale-eyed man turned his head and found Carmen. It wasn't a casual look, nor curious, nor admiring. It was a look directed, as if she were the reason, as if he had come for her, as if her humiliation had been exactly the trigger he was waiting for. And Carmen knew with a certainty that chilled her bones, nothing that night would be simple, safe, or predictable after this. The glass almost slipped, not from the weight of the wine, but from the weight of destiny entering through the door. Carmen stayed in the service station longer than she needed to, fingers resting on the stem of the empty glass. The low murmur of the dining room seeped through the half-wall, muffled and distant, like a city heard from underwater. Her chest still burned. 40 seconds, she thought. That was all it took for someone like Janet to turn a person into an object lesson. She pulled in a slow breath and reached for the stack of spotless crystal anyway. If Janet wanted them polished again, then they would be polished again, so perfect they could cut. She folded the microfiber cloth over her fingers, sprayed a fine mist of solution, and began her circles. Small, precise movements, the stem between her thumb and forefinger. Motion, repetition, rhythm. Her body worked. Her mind tried to unclench. The glass fogged, then cleared. Her reflection appeared in it in fragments. A cheekbone, half a mouth, one dark eye. The pieces didn't line up, but there was something solid in them. The humiliation had shaken her, but underneath the shaking there was a stubborn core, something that refused to crack just because a woman with a perfect bun and a colder heart had decided she was disposable. This was not the end of her story. It wasn't even the middle. It was an ugly little footnote in a chapter she would one day turn into something better. That's what she told herself as she polished the base, the bowl, the rim, until the glass caught the overhead light and threw it back in hard, sharp streaks. The clink of cutlery, the soft glide of conversation and money drifted through the open arch. Someone laughed too loudly about a ski house in Vale. A woman's bracelet chimed every time she lifted her fork. The room, the whole polished machine of it, had already moved on from her embarrassment. She was the only one still standing in that 40 seconds. "Move faster," Janet's voice cut in from the host stand. Not quite loud enough to be called shouting, just precise enough to be heard by anyone who wanted to listen. They don't polish themselves. Carmen didn't look over. If she looked, the heat would climb again, and she wasn't sure this time that she could keep it contained behind her eyes. She simply reached for the next glass. Wipe, turn, breathe. Wipe, turn, breathe. Her hands were steady. Her jaw was not. She thought briefly of her mother in Queens, the way she used to press Carmen's chin up when she was a kid, and someone at school made a comment about her lunch, her accent, her hair. "You don't bow for people who step on others to feel tall," her mother would say. "Let them look down. One day they'll have to tilt their heads up." At the third rack, the repetition began to work. The anger dulled from a sharp edge to a painful throb. She began to count in her head. 7 turns around the bowl, 3 along the stem, 2 across the base, like a private ritual. By the time she finished the last glass in her section, her breathing matched the quiet metronome of her movements. She slid the Chateau Margaux bottle closer, feeling its smooth chill under her palm. The label stared back at her, elegant and indifferent. Half a month of groceries in Bordeaux wrapped in paper and poured for men who didn't glance at their credit card statements. Carmen tipped the bottle, let the wine fall in a slow ruby ribbon, and stopped exactly where the sommelier had taught her. The glass felt heavier now, but not because of the liquid. It was the knowing that people like Janet could snap their fingers and decide if she paid rent this month. Knowing that every step she took in that room was another audition for the right to stay. 10 steps to the table in the corner. That was all. 10 measured strides across a floor that had witnessed more whispered deals than apologies. Carmen adjusted her grip, balanced the tray on one hand, and forced her shoulders to relax. She stepped out from behind the service station. The dining room opened before her like a stage, every table a little island of candlelight and white linen. The air was warm, scented with beurre blanc and roasted fish and money. The low hum of conversation washed over her, the kind of sound that was soothing only if you belonged to it. 1 step. Her shoes made almost no sound, the soles chosen for that exact reason. 2 steps. The weight on her forearm settled into a familiar groove. Her body remembered this path better than her mind remembered sleep. 3 steps. The men at the corner table leaned toward each other, faces lit by their phones and their own importance. At step 4, the front doors opened. They didn't open the way they usually did, gently, with a controlled swing that let only a sliver of city air inside. This time, the heavy glass doors parted with a gust that dragged October in by the throat. A slice of cold wind knifed through the room, rippling the candle flames and lifting the edges of linen like startled breath. Conversation thinned. Not silence. Le Bernardin never truly fell silent, but a sudden thinning like someone had pressed a thumb to the volume knob. Heads turned toward the entrance, not in curiosity, but in instinct. The maitre d', who never lost his composure, faltered mid-step, his practiced smile freezing halfway onto his face. The man in the doorway didn't hurry to cross the threshold. He stood there for a heartbeat, letting the room see him, letting the cold air cling to his coat before the doors sighed shut behind him. Tall, broad, without bulk, he wore a charcoal suit that didn't so much fit his body as align with it, the way armor aligns with the warrior it's forged for. His hair was silver, not in a way that suggested age had taken something from him, but in a way that suggested time had decided to decorate him instead. His skin was the kind that had known sun and winters in boardrooms, and his eyes, pale, clear, a shade between storm and ice, moved through the room with a calm that was not kindness. Carmen's step stalled before she realized it had. The tray hovered in the air. The glass trembled, just enough for the wine to kiss the rim. She tightened her grip, breath lodging halfway in her chest. She had seen powerful people walk into this room before. Hedge fund legends, actresses, men whose scandals had their own headlines. But this was different. This man didn't look around like someone looking for his table. He looked around like someone taking inventory. His gaze moved slowly, unhurried, absorbing the space, the staff, the diners, as if he were checking a list only he could see. The air adjusted around him, the way a body adjusts around a new wound. At the host stand, Janet straightened. The color seemed to drain a fraction from her face. The rigid lines of her posture slipped out of their usual confidence into something tauter, more brittle. She smoothed her jacket with hands that weren't quite as steady as usual and took a step forward, ready to intercept. The man didn't look at her. His eyes passed over her briefly, a flicker of acknowledgement that held no warmth, and then moved on. They drifted across the dining room from table to table, from face to face, like a searchlight sweeping a dark shoreline. People shifted in their seats, suddenly aware of themselves, of their hands, their clothes, their own reflected importance. Carmen tried to move again. Her body refused. For a strange, irrational moment, she had the sense that if she took one more step, she would cross into some invisible line he had drawn. It was ridiculous. He was just another man with money and a presence. She was a waitress with a tray and a glass and a supervisor who hated her. His gaze found her. It didn't slide past her the way it did the other staff. It stopped. Landed. Stayed. The pale blue pinned her where she stood, 10 steps from the corner table, half a room away from him. It wasn't lust or annoyance or idle curiosity. It felt like recognition. Except Carmen was certain she had never seen him before in her life. Her stomach dropped all the same, as if some deeper part of her memory disagreed. Her fingers tightened around the stem. Heat climbed the back of her neck. For a heartbeat, all the sounds in the restaurant, the forks, the glasses, the murmurs, fell behind the rush of blood in her ears. The only thing that existed was that gaze, that quiet, measuring question she could not hear but somehow felt. Janet saw it. Carmen could tell. From the corner of her vision, she caught the way the supervisor's eyes flicked from the man to Carmen and back again, calculating. There was a flash of something almost raw on Janet's face. Alarm, maybe, or a realization she didn't like. It was gone in an instant, smoothed over by professional neutrality. Carmen forced herself to breathe. One inhale, one exhale. She shifted her weight, preparing to move again, to pretend none of this was happening. But the man in the charcoal suit didn't release her. He took a step forward, the leather of his shoes whispering against the floor, and the room seemed to narrow between them like a corridor. He walked past the first row of tables, past the bar, past Janet's tight smile and the maitre d's rehearsed welcome, all without taking his eyes off her. People turned in their seats to follow his path, the way they might follow a slowly approaching storm on the horizon, unsure whether it would break over them or spare them. By the time he stopped, he was close enough that Carmen could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the slight scar near his jawline, the controlled way his chest rose and fell beneath the fabric of his shirt. He looked at her as if she were not a waitress with a tray, but a piece on a board he had been studying for a very long time. Carmen swallowed. The glass felt suddenly too light in her hand, as if all its weight had poured into her chest instead. The urge to speak, to say "Good evening, sir," or "Welcome to Le Bernardin," rose to her tongue and died there. There was something in his expression that made all the usual scripts feel stupid, small. The man's lips parted just enough for his voice to slip through, low and even, carrying in the charged quiet like a note struck on fine crystal. He spoke her name. Carmen didn't remember moving, but suddenly she was standing just one step back, tray lowered, as if her body had flinched before her mind could catch up. Her name still echoed inside her skull, not loudly, not sharply, but with the soft precision of something impossible. He couldn't know her. He shouldn't know her. Yet he had said it like a man stating a fact, not asking a question. Her pulse stuttered. A strange heat gathered low in her gut, not attraction, not fear, something far older, like recognition stirring in the bones. She tried to speak, but her throat tightened, caught between instinct and confusion. "Sir," she managed barely. The man didn't blink. His gaze held her in a quiet vice. "You're trembling," he said, voice calm but not kind, more observation than concern. She stiffened. Her hand was trembling, damn it. Just enough for the wine surface to quiver. She willed it still, her fingers tightening around the stem until the glass no longer dared to move. "I'm fine," she said softly, but the words came out thinner than she hoped. He angled his head, studying her as though she were a puzzle he'd expected to solve long ago. The attention was suffocating. She felt stripped, seen in a way that wasn't intimate but forensic. Behind them, the dining room still hummed, forks clinking, conversations resuming in nervous spurts. But a different atmosphere had bloomed around the two of them. It was smaller, heavier, like a bubble of colder air in a warm room. "Do you know him?" Janet's voice snapped from behind. Carmen turned, too quickly. Janet's heels clicked as she approached, each strike sharp with irritation or fear. Carmen couldn't tell which. The supervisor's lips were pulled into a thin, practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes," the man answered before Carmen could open her mouth. The word hit the air with the weight of a verdict. Carmen inhaled sharply. Janet's smile faltered for half a second. A brief crack, almost beautiful in its vulnerability. Before she recovered, "I see." Janet smoothed her blazer, then lifted her chin, her voice crisp and eager to reclaim authority. "Welcome to Le Bernardin. If you'll follow me, we can find you a—" "No," the man interrupted gently. Not loudly, not cruelly, just firmly enough that the entire room seemed to tighten. Janet froze. He shifted slightly, his gaze still locked on Carmen. "She'll take care of me." Carmen felt her spine go rigid. "Sir, I'm serving the corner table. No," he repeated, softer this time. "You'll take care of me." The clarity of the words left no room for misinterpretation. He wasn't asking, and yet it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like inevitability. The maitre d' hurried over, sweat beading at his temple. Of course, Mr." But he stopped, choking on the uncertainty. The man had not given his name. He didn't need to. "Your reservation?" The maitre d' tried, voice trembling around its edges. "I came without one." His gaze sharpened. "I don't need one." And somehow, every person watching silently agreed. The maitre d' nodded too quickly and gestured toward a secluded table near the back, one usually reserved for high-profile figures who didn't want to be seen. The man ignored the gesture. He didn't follow anyone. Instead, he walked past staff and patrons alike, his stride slow, deliberate, claiming the room with each step. Janet leaned toward Carmen, whispering low but harsh, "Don't mess this up." Carmen said nothing. Her voice abandoned her. Her heartbeat thundered against her ribs as she followed the man, still carrying the glass she had poured for someone else. She set it down on a nearby tray, afraid it would shatter in her hand. He stopped at a corner table, one half lit by the warm glow of a wall sconce, the other touched by the cool reflection of the city lights outside, a liminal space. Neither shadow nor spotlight, exactly the kind of place where secrets were spoken. Carmen felt the air change around him, a pressure building. Not oppressive, but alert, like the room itself was listening. He sat. Not with arrogance, but with an inevitability that suggested he'd always intended to occupy that chair. Carmen approached slowly. Too slowly. Every movement felt watched. Weighed. Her palms were damp. The linen apron suddenly felt too tight around her waist. She stopped at the edge of the table, forcing her shoulders to soften into the professional posture she knew by heart. "What can I bring you, sir?" she whispered. His reply came without hesitation. The truth. Carmen's breath caught. He watched her reaction with a quiet patience, as if he'd been waiting for the exact flicker of fear that crossed her eyes. When she didn't answer, he leaned back slightly, his gaze still fixed on her. "Start with your name," he said. "Not the one you wear for the customers, the real one." Ice slid down her spine. She hadn't used her real first name in years. Only her family knew it. Only her documents. Only someone who had no business knowing her at all. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. She could only stare at him, pulse hammering, skin prickling with a dread she couldn't explain. The man looked at her with something unreadable, something that sat between memory and calculation. Then, in a voice softer than before, he said, "You haven't asked why I'm here." Carmen swallowed hard. "Why?" she whispered. He didn't look away. "Because 20 years ago," he murmured, "your mother made me a promise." The room spun. The words hit her like a blow she never saw coming. A promise? Her mother? Her knees nearly buckled. And then, as if to drive the knife deeper, he added, And tonight, Carmen, I've come to collect it. Carmen's fingers tightened around the edge of the tablecloth, anchoring herself to something solid before her knees betrayed her. Noise blurred into a distant hum, the clink of forks, the polished laughter, the muted thud of kitchen doors. Everything dimmed at the edges, as if someone had lowered the lights on the entire restaurant except for this table, this man, this impossible moment. A promise? Her mother? Her throat constricted around the word collect, as if it had claws. The man watched her carefully, not with the arrogance of someone holding power, but with the unsettling composure of someone who had expected her exact reaction. He folded his hands on the table, the fabric of his suit shifting with a soft rasp, and waited. Mr. Sir, her voice cracked. I don't understand what you're talking about. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth, not warm, not mocking, but deeply aware. You do, he said quietly. You just don't know you do. Her breath hitched. My mother never... He cut her off gently with a tilt of his head. Your mother told you very little, Carmen. About many things. The words hit like a cold draft across the skin. Carmen straightened, instinctively defensive. Her mother had been strict, tired, sometimes distant, but not secretive. Not the kind of woman who made mysterious promises to powerful strangers. Except a flicker surfaced. A memory she rarely touched. A crushed envelope. Her mother crying behind the bathroom door the night before their move from Mexico to New York. Carmen had been 9. She hadn't understood. She still didn't. The man's gaze sharpened, as if he could see the memory forming. He tapped the table once, lightly. Sit. She froze. I can't. Staff aren't allowed. I said, he repeated more quietly this time. Sit. It wasn't a threat. It was a gravity. Something in the room tugged her forward, and despite every rule drilled into her bones, Carmen slid into the vacant chair opposite him. Janet saw. Of course she saw. Carmen sensed the supervisor hovering at a distance, torn between intervening and staying out of the crossfire. The other diners pretended to look away while watching intensely through peripheral vision. Carmen whispered, What promise? He leaned back in his chair, eyes glinting with something too heavy to be nostalgia. Your mother was young, desperate, and very, very brave. A tremor ran through Carmen's arms. You knew her? Knew her? His laugh was low, humorless. Carmen, your mother saved my life. She blinked. The words were absurd. Her mother, a waitress, a seamstress, a woman who never left Queens, saving the life of a man who walked into Le Bernardin like he owned the air. I think you're confusing. No, I'm not. His voice carried a weight that stopped her cold. I owed her a debt, he continued. She asked only one thing in return. Promise me you'll protect my daughter if the day ever comes. Carmen felt something collapse inside her. Her mother never used that tone. Not with strangers, not with anyone. It didn't fit. It didn't make sense. And yet, the memory of the locked bathroom door pressed harder against her mind, sharper now. The muffled sob, the whisper she hadn't been meant to hear. Dios mío, por favor, que nunca llegue ese día. Carmen swallowed, stunned. Why? Why now? Why me? The man didn't answer immediately. He glanced toward the entrance, the same doors he'd burst through with the October wind. His expression dimmed, as if remembering something he carried like a scar. There are reasons, he said, eyes narrowing slightly. And danger, the kind you haven't yet recognized. Her pulse spiked. Danger? From who? That depends. He studied her face, every micro-expression. On how much your mother told you before she died. Carmen's heart twisted sharply. She didn't tell me anything. She never... Her voice broke. She pressed her nails into her palm to steady it. She never talked about her past. Of course she didn't. The man's voice softened for the first time. She was protecting you. Carmen bristled. Protecting me from what? He exhaled slowly, almost reluctantly, as if each word cost something. From the people who destroyed her life, and who will come for yours the moment they learn your name. Her blood went cold. My name? They don't know me. They will, he said. After tonight, the room seemed to tilt slightly. Carmen gripped the edge of the table, grounding herself against the rising panic. Why tonight? she asked, barely breathing. What did I do? His pale eyes fixed on hers, unwavering, merciless. You were seen, he murmured. Humiliated. Exposed. Janet Morrison has no idea what she triggered when she raised her voice. But someone in this city hears every crack in the floorboards, and Carmen... He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a razor-thin whisper. They've been waiting for a sign. Carmen's pulse hammered at her temples. What sign? You, he said simply. Her stomach dropped. You stepping out of the shadows, he continued. You revealing yourself. You standing exactly where I've been searching for you, without even knowing it. Carmen felt dizzy, the room blurring in and out of focus. Searching for me? Why? Who are you? For the first time, emotion flickered behind his eyes. Something like sorrow, cloaked beneath steel. My name doesn't matter yet, he said, but what does matter is this. You're not safe tonight. And I'm the only one in this room who can keep you alive long enough for you to hear the truth. Carmen's breath stalled. Alive? Her fingers began to tremble again, no matter how hard she clenched them. The Tycoon straightened, his chair whispering against the floor. The candlelight carved hard lines across his face. They know you're here, he said. Who? She whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, his gaze slid past her shoulder toward the entrance. Carmen turned. Two men in dark coats had just stepped inside. Not diners, not staff. Scanning the room, looking for someone. Her. Carmen's first instinct was denial. Those men could have been anyone. Lawyers, late reservations, corporate security for some billionaire table. But something in the way they stood just inside the doorway, not taking off their coats, not glancing at the menu, made her stomach twist. They weren't interested in food. Their eyes moved the way the Tycoon's had when he entered, but with none of his control. Their scan was sharp, impatient, hunting. The taller of the two had close-cropped dark hair and a jaw like it had been carved by blunt force. His tie was slightly loosened, as if he'd been in a car for hours, pacing mentally the whole way. The other was slimmer, with an accountant's glasses and a face that would have disappeared in any crowd, if not for the way his gaze slid across the room with clinical efficiency, cataloging faces, habits, exits. Carmen's fingers dug into her apron. They're just customers, she whispered more to herself than to the man across from her. The Tycoon's eyes never left the new arrivals. His jaw worked once, a faint muscle twitching. No, he said. They're not. The maitre d' recovered first, gliding toward them in a well-practiced arc. His smile was back in place, professional, affable. Good evening, gentlemen. Do you have... We're looking for someone, the taller man said, not bothering to lower his voice enough. His accent held the city, Brooklyn edges smoothed by too many corporate lobbies. Latina waitress, mid-20s, dark hair, works here. The maitre d's smile faltered. Just a fraction. Just enough. Carmen felt the blood drain from her face. The slimmer man lifted a phone, thumb scrolling. Got a blurry shot, back entrance earlier today. He turned the screen briefly toward the host stand. You've seen her? The maitre d' hesitated. It was less than a second, but in the charged quiet it felt like an entire evening. Carmen could see the calculation behind his eyes. Liability, reputation, police, trouble. She saw, too, the moment he decided telling the truth was not worth the chaos. I'm afraid our staff information is private, he began carefully. If you'd like to... Don't lie, the taller one snapped. The word cut across the room like a knife dropped in porcelain. Several diners looked up. Janet, who had been watching from her vantage point like a hawk, stepped forward, poised to intervene. At the corner table, the Tycoon finally shifted his gaze back to Carmen. Listen to me, he said quietly. You have exactly two options now. Panic. Stand up. Draw every eye here and get yourself killed in under 5 minutes. Her breath hitched. Or do exactly as I tell you and make it out of this room alive. It was so absurd, so dramatic. It almost made her laugh. Killed? In Le Bernardin, under soft golden light and hushed $100 conversations? But the look in his eyes left no room for disbelief. This was not exaggeration. This was warning. Her voice came out in a thread. Who are they? Pieces, he said. On a board you can't see yet. Working for someone who believes you shouldn't exist. cold slid down the back of her neck. Why? What did I ever? Not now. His gaze burned into hers. You want answers, Carmen? Survive the next hour. Janet chose that moment to glide between tables and intercept the men. Her posture was immaculate, her smile crisp, as if she were taking a complaint about undercooked fish instead of facing down two predators. Gentlemen, she murmured, Le Bernardin is a place of discretion. If you're looking for an employee, you can contact management during... The slimmer man cut her off, his tone almost bored. We did. They said she wasn't on shift. Janet's eyes flicked almost involuntarily toward the service station. Just a flicker. But Carmen saw it. So did the men. The taller one's mouth curled. That's so? Carmen's skin prickled. The room seemed to shrink, the air growing thicker. The candlelight suddenly felt too bright, exposing things better left in shadow. Stand up, the Tycoon said softly. She looked at him, dazed. You just told me not to bolt, he corrected. There's a difference. He pushed his chair back with measured slowness, the sound barely more than a whisper. You're going to walk with me, he continued, voice barely audible above the murmur of the room. Not fast, not slow, just enough to look like you're leading an important guest to the wine display. Her mind raced. They'll see me. If you stay, they will see you, he murmured. If you move now, behind the line of the bar, away from direct sight lines, you have a chance. I didn't barge into this place without a plan, Carmen. I knew they'd come. I just didn't know if you'd be here tonight. Her heart lurched. You wanted them to come? His gaze hardened. I wanted a chance to keep a 20-year-old promise. The words hit her chest like a fist. 20 years. She hadn't even turned 10 back then. Whatever her mother had done, whatever bargain had been struck, it was older than any mistake Carmen had made herself. The injustice burned in her throat. I don't trust you, she whispered. Good, he said without pause. Trust isn't required. Obedience is. Rage flared hot under her fear. Rage at his arrogance, at Janet's cruelty, at the fact that apparently her life had been collateral in a game no one had bothered to explain. But rage, she realized, could be useful. It gave her spine. It gave her a reason to stand that wasn't just terror. She inhaled slowly, then pushed her chair back. Her legs felt numb, but they held. She straightened her apron with fingers that insisted on trembling and reached for the notepad at her hip. The gesture automatic, practiced. To anyone watching, she was simply resuming service at a VIP table. The Tycoon rose beside her. Up close, he felt even larger, his presence filling her peripheral vision. He buttoned his jacket with elegant economy, as if preparing for a meeting rather than a confrontation. Stay half a step ahead of me, he said quietly. If they look this way, I'm your client. You're leading me to see the private dining room. We don't show... Tonight you do. His hand didn't touch her, but she could feel the gravity of him at her back as she stepped away from the table. 1 step. 2. The room swam slightly. Don't look at the door. Don't look at the men. She failed. Her eyes flicked over just long enough to see Janet gesturing toward the bar, her expression strained. The slimmer man adjusted his glasses and turned his head, gaze slicing across the room like a laser. For a horrible second, his eyes locked on hers. Carmen's breath stopped. Then a guest laughed loudly at a nearby table, drawing his attention away. The moment passed like a bullet that just missed flesh. Keep walking, the Tycoon said, his tone unchanged. She did. Past the bar, where bartenders moved with mechanical grace. Past a row of couples leaning over shared desserts. Past a table where a young woman in silk was crying quietly into her napkin, while a man checked his email. The air by the kitchen door felt cooler, cut by drafts from the back hallway. The smell of butter and shallots grew stronger. The world of performance gave way to the world of heat and noise and unpolished exhaustion. Maria saw her first. Her colleague's eyes flicked from Carmen's face to the man at her shoulder, and something in her expression tightened. Maria had been in this country longer. She recognized trouble when it entered her room. You okay? She mouthed. Carmen gave the tiniest shake of her head. No, not even close. The Tycoon stepped around her, taking the lead for the first time, and pushed his way through the narrow corridor beside the walk-in fridge, toward a side door rarely used except for deliveries. He moved like he'd memorized the floor plan. Maybe he had. "How do you know this place?" Carmen asked, voice low. "I own part of the building," he said. "Stay close." Of course he did. They stopped at an unmarked gray door, metal cold and nondescript. It looked like any other back-of-house exit, the kind you used for smoke breaks and trash runs, not escape routes from invisible enemies. The Tycoon pressed his palm flat against it, as if feeling for vibrations on the other side. He turned his head slightly, listening. Carmen's heart was beating so loudly in her own ears, she couldn't imagine anyone else hearing anything. He stepped back. Change of plan. Ice rippled down her spine. What? They're not alone. His gaze darkened. Someone's already covering the alley. Fear snapped sharp and immediate. "You said there was a plan?" "There is." He studied her, weighing something she couldn't see. It just got narrower. The kitchen noise surged around them. Orders being called, pans hitting burners, the impatient rhythm of service. Carmen stood in a sliver of suspended reality, half in that world and half in whatever nightmare had just walked in the front door. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Really? Don't say protection. Don't say promises. What do you actually want?" For the first time since he'd arrived, he seemed caught off guard. Not structurally, but emotionally, as if the question had hit him somewhere he'd tried to keep armored. "I want," he said slowly, "for you not to die because of a choice you never got to make." Tears burned the back of her eyes. She hated them, hated that they wanted to fall in front of this man of all people. She blinked hard until they retreated. From the hallway entrance, a voice cut through the clatter. "Carmen?" Her name again. But not from the Tycoon. She turned. The taller man from the entrance stood at the edge of the kitchen, coat open now, eyes locked on her. Behind him, the slimmer one was talking quietly to Janet, who pointed, straight down the corridor where Carmen stood. The taller man smiled. Not kindly. "There you are," he said. The kitchen shrank around her. Noise sharpened, pans hissing, plates clattering, a chef cursing in French, but all of it blurred at the edges of the man's smile. He stood there like he owned the threshold, a dark shape at the seam between two worlds. The polished lie of the dining room and the brutal honesty of the back of house. His gaze slid over Carmen's uniform, her apron, the tension in her shoulders, and settled on her eyes with lazy satisfaction. "Busy night?" he asked, as if they were old acquaintances running into each other at a bar. Carmen's throat closed. Behind her, she felt the Tycoon's presence tighten, like a muscle pulling inward. He didn't move. He didn't step into view, but the air around him solidified, dense and cold. Maria froze at the dish station, hands submerged in gray water, eyes widening. The line cooks slowed, throwing quick glances over their shoulders before looking away. Trouble that wasn't theirs had no place in a kitchen this busy. Carmen forced air into her lungs. "Can I help you with something?" she asked, surprising herself with how even her voice sounded. The taller man's smile widened. "You can, actually. Carmen, right?" He wasn't asking. The slim one appeared at his shoulder, glasses slightly fogged from the heat. Up close, he looked less like an accountant and more like a surgeon, precise, detached. He studied her like he was checking a description against reality and found no discrepancies. "That's her," he said simply. Her fingers curled involuntarily. The taller man took a step forward. "We just need a quick word. Outside. Won't take long." The Tycoon stepped into view. He didn't announce himself. He didn't clear his throat or demand attention. He simply moved around Carmen with quiet certainty, placing himself between her and the men with the kind of effortless authority that didn't need explanation. "You'll speak to her here," he said. The kitchen temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The taller man's face shifted. The casual smile tightened at the edges. Didn't realize she had company. The slim one's eyes flicked to the Tycoon, and something like recognition passed across his features. Not full familiarity, but an echo. "We're not looking for you," he said. "This isn't your concern." The Tycoon's gaze remained level, unblinking. "You came into a restaurant I partially own, lied to the host, harassed my staff, and are now blocking an active service line. That makes it very much my concern." The taller man's jaw worked. "Owner, huh?" he drawled. "Funny. Thought you didn't do restaurants. I don't, the tycoon said. I do real estate, leverage buyouts, and asset recovery. Tonight, the asset you're trying to walk out with is under my protection. The word asset made Carmen flinch. She hated it. Hated being spoken about like something on a spreadsheet. But in that moment, she also understood. Language like that was the only kind these men respected. The slim one exhaled sharply, impatience flaring. We're not here for a scene. We're here because someone filed the wrong paperwork 20 years ago and a loose end slipped through. We tidy loose ends. That's all. She comes with us. We're gone in 5 minutes. Carmen's blood ran cold. Loose end. The phrase felt like a gloved hand closing around her throat. The tycoon's eyes darkened. You're not taking her anywhere. Not up to you, the taller man said. He reached into his coat pocket. Not too fast. Nothing that would scream weapon. But fast enough that half the kitchen stiffened. He pulled out a thin leather folder and flipped it open. We're working under authorization. A badge. Not police. Not FBI. Something more obscure. 3 letters Carmen didn't recognize, stamped in metallic ink above an eagle that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd never seen one in real life. The tycoon glanced at it once and didn't even blink. You flashed that at the host? He asked calmly. Didn't need to, the taller man said. Janet pointed us right where we needed to go. The name hit the air like a stone. Carmen's spine stiffened. Behind them, at the edge of the kitchen, Janet hovered, arms crossed, face tense but composed. She had the expression of someone who had convinced herself she'd done the right thing, or at least the necessary thing. It's not my job to obstruct official business, she said, voice clipped. If Carmen has unresolved immigration or legal issues, that's not on me. The restaurant can't afford. This isn't immigration, the slim one snapped, the first crack in his controlled tone. She's not in trouble for paperwork. She is the paperwork. Carmen stared at him. The words didn't make sense, but they cut anyway. The tycoon took a half step forward, subtle but unmistakable. You're not walking her out of here on some vague threat and a badge I could print in my office, he said. If you want to touch her, you go through me. And I assure you, you don't have clearance for that. The taller man's eyes narrowed. You think throwing your name around scares us? It doesn't need to, the tycoon said. But the 3 calls I make after this will. Do you want headlines? Federal adjacent operatives showing up at a Michelin-starred restaurant attempting to remove a Latina waitress without a warrant? Manhattan loves a scandal when it smells like class warfare. The slim one's jaw clenched. You assume we care about headlines. I assume your employer does, the tycoon replied. And he's the one who'll be dragged through them. The taller man shifted his weight, calculating. Carmen could see the tug of war inside him. Mission versus mess. Efficiency versus fallout. We can do this the quiet way, the slim one said. She comes with us, answers some questions, signs some papers. No one has to know. Or we can come back with more support, shut this place down for a night and ask everyone a lot of uncomfortable questions about a woman whose very existence is a clerical error. A cold, hollow nausea opened inside Carmen. Don't listen, the tycoon murmured, barely loud enough for her ears alone. He's bluffing. Mostly. Mostly? She hissed back, panic spiking. The taller man caught the exchange, lips curling. You didn't tell her? He asked the tycoon. About her file? About the way her birth certificate looks like it was made in a basement with a dot matrix printer? About the fact that, on paper, she was never supposed to leave that border town alive? Carmen's vision blurred. The fluorescent kitchen lights seemed to flicker. Stop, she whispered. Maria stepped forward from the dish pit, water dripping from her gloves. You don't talk to her like that, she said, voice trembling but resolute. The taller man glanced at her with mild annoyance. This isn't about you. Everything in this kitchen is about us, one of the line cooks muttered, not looking up from his pan. It was an act of solidarity so small and risky it almost broke Carmen's heart. The tycoon lifted a hand slightly, not to silence them, but to keep them from stepping further into the crosshairs. You're done, he told the 2 men. Leave. If you want her, you go through proper channels. Get a warrant. File a summons. And pray I'm not on the other end of the table when you do. The slim one's nostrils flared. You think you can babysit her forever? We don't stop because a rich man says please. No, the tycoon agreed. You stop because your boss will tell you to. After he hears what I have to say, he reached into his own jacket slowly, deliberate, and pulled out a phone. No flourish, no theatrics. He held it up like a weapon carved from glass and light. You report to Javier Solano, he said. The name fell like a dropped plate. Both men went still. Carmen had never heard it before, but she recognized the impact. Names like that didn't belong to car dealers or mid-level managers. They belonged to people whose mistakes became policy and whose secrets became wars. The slim man's voice thinned. You don't know. I know a lot, the tycoon said quietly, including the fact that he's had people looking for a dead woman's child for 2 decades. I also know he doesn't want his offshore arrangements, his black ledger, or the details of what happened in Sonora 20 years ago dragged into any court, federal or international. Sonora, the word shoved a memory to the surface. Sun like a hammer, the smell of dust and burning fuel. Her mother's hands shaking as she packed a single duffel bag. Carmen remembered asking why they were leaving. Her mother had looked at her then with eyes full of some wild, frantic terror and said only, "Because we can." The taller man swallowed. His bravado faltered for the first time. You're bluffing. Am I? The tycoon's gaze was icy calm. Call him. Put this on speaker. I'll wait. The kitchen held its breath. The slim man exchanged a glance with his partner. Some silent calculus passed between them, a decision tree branching through possible futures. Jail, exposure, disappearances, orders. He exhaled slowly and shook his head once. Not here, he muttered. Not like this. The taller man's jaw flexed. He looked at Carmen again, the hunger in his gaze tempered now by annoyance, by frustration. This isn't over, he said. Nothing is, the tycoon replied. That's the problem with unfinished business. They turned, walked back through the kitchen with practiced restraint, shoulders tight, hands empty. They passed Janet without a glance. She flinched anyway. Only when the doors swung closed behind them, muffling the noise of the dining room, did Carmen realize she'd been holding her breath. It left her in a rush, leaving her lightheaded and shaky. You're safe for now, the tycoon said. The words didn't land. Safe didn't feel like a real thing anymore. It felt like a word other people used in movies. Carmen's knees finally buckled. Maria rushed forward, grabbing her elbow, guiding her to a small metal stool near the prep counter. Stainless steel pressed into the backs of her thighs, cold and unforgiving. What the hell is going on? Janet hissed, stepping closer, fury warring with fear. Who are you? Who were they? Do you have any idea what kind of liability? The tycoon didn't even look at her. You raised your voice to the wrong person tonight, he said. I'd worry less about liability and more about your employment. Management will be very interested to hear how quickly you sold one of your own staff to strangers with no warrants. Janet's face went bloodless. I didn't sell anyone. You cooperated, he said. You pointed. That's enough. Her mouth opened, closed. For the first time all evening, she looked small. Not because Carmen needed her to be, but because the shield of her authority had been stripped away, revealing something brittle underneath. I didn't know, she said, the words ripped out of her. I thought it was immigration or fraud or you thought it was her fault, the tycoon said calmly. And that made it easy. Silence swallowed the corridor. Janet's eyes flicked to Carmen, looking for something. Maybe accusation, maybe forgiveness. Carmen had nothing to give her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The supervisor stepped back, shoulders rigid, and turned sharply on her heel, disappearing into the bright glare of the pass. The kitchen swallowed her up and immediately forgot her. She was one more moving part in a machine designed to keep going no matter who was bleeding. Carmen pressed her palms to her face. Her skin felt too hot, too tight. Tell me the truth, she whispered into the darkness of her own hands. All of it. Now. The tycoon was silent for a long time. The sounds of service rose and fell around them. Maria squeezed her shoulder once and retreated, giving them a bubble of privacy in the middle of chaos. Finally, he spoke. Your mother didn't leave Mexico because she wanted a better life, he said quietly. She left because she saved mine and ruined Javier Solano's in the same night. Carmen lowered her hands, vision filmed with unshed tears. How? By making a choice, he said. One you were never meant to know existed. He looked at her, and for the first time since he'd walked through the door, his eyes weren't just cold or calculating. They were tired, haunted. You were never supposed to be born, Carmen, he said softly. Not with your name. Not with your mother. Not in that country. The night she saved me, she stole you from the man who believes you belong to him. Her heart stopped. Your real last name, he finished, voice low and relentless. Should have been Solano. Carmen didn't move at first. She just stared at the Tycoon, the echoes of his last sentence still beating against her ribs like fists trying to get out. Your real last name should have been Solano. The words didn't fit into her bones. They kept slipping, rattling, refusing to settle into anything that felt like truth. No, she whispered, shaking her head. That's impossible. He didn't flinch. His expression was steady, quiet, painfully patient. I wouldn't have come here if I wasn't certain. Her chest tightened. My name is Alvarez. My mother, she never... Carmen swallowed hard. She would have told me. She kept you safe, he said simply. That was all she had space for. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, filling the silence with a thin, anxious buzz. The kitchen clattered around them, voices, pans, sizzling burners, but all of it felt far away, like sound traveling down a tunnel. Carmen steadied her hands on her knees. Then explain. All of it. Without talking to me like I'm some liability on a balance sheet. A flicker of respect crossed his expression. He nodded. 20 years ago, he began, voice low but steady. Your mother and I were in the same place at the wrong time. A warehouse in Sonora. A deal gone bad. Solano ran things there. Money, transport, people. When he suspected betrayal, he ordered everyone in that building erased. Carmen's breath stalled. Your mother wasn't supposed to be there, he continued. She worked a night shift cleaning offices next door, but she walked in at exactly the wrong moment and saw everything. And when the shooting started, she dragged me into a maintenance tunnel and kept me alive. She saved you, Carmen murmured. She saved us both, he said. Because in that warehouse was a ledger detailing a trafficking arrangement. Children promised on paper to men who wanted ownership more than family. Your name was in it. Carmen froze. You were listed, he said, not as a daughter, as a transaction. The nausea hit like a wave. No, she whispered again. No, that's not. My mother loved me. She did, he said gently. Enough to steal you from that ledger, burn her way out of Sonora, fake a certificate, and cross a border with nothing but you and the clothes on her back. Enough to beg me on her knees to protect you if Solano ever discovered what she'd done. Carmen pressed her trembling fingers to her forehead. Memories flickered. Her mother sobbing behind a bathroom door, the burned smell on her hands the night before they left Mexico, the terror in her voice when she'd said, No te vas a quedar con ella. Carmen's throat closed. And those men tonight, sent to collect what Solano thinks he's owed, he said. He heard a rumor, a face in a database, a whisper. Tonight was the first time he got close. And the last? She asked, voice cracking. Yes, he said calmly, because I'll make sure of it. She looked up sharply. Why? Why risk your life for someone you barely know? His expression shifted, just barely, but enough to reveal the truth hiding beneath the steel. Because I made your mother a promise, he said, and I don't break promises, not to the dead. Carmen stared at him, at the exhaustion in his eyes, the quiet conviction in his voice, the faint tremor in his hand he tried to hide. For the first time since he'd entered the restaurant, she realized he wasn't a storm. He was a man carrying the weight of a 20-year debt on his shoulders. And what happens now? She asked softly. Now, he said, you get a choice your mother never had. He stepped closer, not invasive, not looming, just near enough that she could hear the sincerity in his breath. Tomorrow morning, he continued, my attorney will contact you. You'll be briefed, protected, given legal pathways your mother could never afford. Your identity can be rebuilt properly, safely. You'll be untouchable. And if I don't want your help, she asked, searching his face, then I still call Solano, he said. Still warn him off. Still make sure tonight was the closest he'll ever get. And after that, you'll never see me again. Carmen let out a shaky breath. The kitchen light softened around her, the noise drifting back into focus. She could hear Maria murmuring in Spanish with another cook, could smell butter and shallots and the burnt edge of something left too long on the stove. Life, ordinary, imperfect. Hers. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I'll meet your attorney," she said quietly. "But I'm not letting anyone decide my life for me again. Not you, not him." A slow, genuine warmth touched his eyes. "Good. Your mother would be proud." The unexpected tenderness almost broke her, but she held steady. He stepped aside so she could stand. Maria rushed over, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "You okay?" Maria whispered. "No," Carmen said honestly, "but I will be." Together they made their way to the staff lockers. Carmen peeled off her apron, folded it with trembling hands, and grabbed her coat. Her reflection in the dented locker mirror looked different, still tired, still shaken, but sharpened, like someone waking from a dream into a truth she finally deserved to know. By the time she walked outside through the staff entrance, a black sedan was idling at the curb. The Tycoon stopped beside her, keeping respectful distance. "You'll get an email at 9, he said. "The first step toward a life no one can erase." "Do you have a name?" she asked suddenly. "Your real one." He hesitated, then gave it to her. "Adrian Cole." It fit him. Clean, sharp, understated. She nodded. "Good night, Adrian." "Good night, Carmen." The ride home blurred by in ribbons of streetlight and cold October air. When she reached her apartment, she leaned against the counter for a long moment, letting the silence settle. Her mother's picture on the fridge seemed to watch her with fierce, tired love. "Gracias, Mama," she whispered. "I'm safe. I promise." At exactly 9:01 a.m., her phone buzzed with a new email. Carmen smiled. Not a big smile, just a quiet, steady one, filled with something she had been denied her entire life. A future she could choose, and for the first time, she didn't feel like a girl running from someone else's story. She felt like the woman who would end it.